Welcome to Make Peace with Food. I'm your host, Emily LaVoie, a certified eating psychology coach. I own a virtual private practice, and I work with clients all over the world, one-on-one and in group programs, to help heal their relationship with food and improve body image. Here at Make Peace with Food, we believe food is not your enemy, that eating should be fun and bring you joy and pleasure, not stress and guilt. To keep this a safe space, I will try my best to avoid mentioning numbers like calories and weight, as well as other potentially triggering content, but you know yourself best, so please avoid any episode topics that may not feel helpful to where you're at in your healing journey. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes. It's not a replacement for medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor does it provide a client or patient relationship. Consult your own provider on any changes you're thinking about making. Today's episode is brought to you by my one-on-one coaching. If you're curious about becoming a client and want to learn more about what it looks and feels like to receive support in healing your relationship with food and improving your body image, go to my website, emily-lavoie.com, to schedule a free 30-minute Zoom consultation. Welcome to episode 3. Before we dive into the content of today's episode, I'm going to just take a couple minutes to give you all a little life update. At the time of recording, I just got back from Key West. I was actually celebrating Valentine's Day in Key West, and I did not know I was also celebrating Super Bowl Sunday in Key West and Mardi Gras in Key West. There was a lot of things that happened all in one week. And then while I was there, I got COVID. So that was a little bit of a bummer, but overall, it was still a really fun trip. Also, at time of recording, we are in the midst of National Eating Disorder Awareness Week 2024, which is always the last week of February. And this year, it kind of rolls from the end of February and also into March, with just how the calendar is. And that's really fun because the purpose is to educate and inform. And I'm getting more and more passionate about prevention. So I feel like that education and information piece about eating disorders should be preventative, hopefully. And I try to be way more active on social media this week. So that's been taking up a lot of my time and attention. Pretty exciting stuff. So let's get into the episode. Today's episode, I really want the listeners to be able to pause and think about some things that apply to their life. So basically, in my mind, I'm assuming that if you are a listener of this podcast, there's a really good likelihood that you might be struggling with some food and eating stuff of your own. Some challenges are coming up for you, whether that's emotional eating or binge eating, or you're a chronic dieter, or you have weight cycled or yo-yo dieted. Maybe you feel like you are addicted to food. Maybe you're struggling with disordered eating or an eating disorder, or you're in recovery from an eating disorder. Maybe you're really struggling with some body image stuff. Maybe you don't have a great relationship with exercise. So whatever the challenge is, hopefully with these episodes and the questions that I'm going to extend and ask you, it gives you a second to pause and analyze what's currently going on in your life and in your thoughts and coming out in your behaviors when it comes to food and eating and when it comes to your body image, and sometimes exercise and movement applies to that as well. So it's going to be really helpful to analyze where you're currently at and think about where you want to go. So getting to the point of, this is where I'm at. It's not a great place. And this is the direction I'm going. This is my end goal. So we kind of think of this as, where I'm at versus where I want to be. Okay. So the first question, it's not a simple question to explain. So stick with me. And there are 3 parts to kind of roll into this one somewhat complex question to start thinking about. So the best way I can word this is, I want you to think about your thought space. And as a podcaster, a person hosting a podcast, I talk with my hands a lot. So it's a little bit challenging for me to try to explain this with words without, realizing you guys can't see my hand gestures. So when I talk about this, I wave my hand from the top of my head or the crown of my head down to the bottom of my head, kind of where my neck starts. And I just kind of wave it back and forth, up and down, kind of like spanning the length of my head when I talk about that. So envision that, but think about your thought space. Think about your mental capacity or your thought energy. And we're going to break this single question down into 3 parts. So think about the thought space that food and eating takes up in your head. How much of your mental energy is going toward food and eating? Maybe it's 50%. Maybe it's 60, 70, 80. Who knows what it is for you as an individual? And that could include thoughts about what you should be eating at future meals. So what you're going to be eating later on today for lunch or for dinner, or what you're going to eat tomorrow, or what you're going to order at the restaurant that you're going to this weekend. It could also include ingredients that you want to avoid eating. It could include recipes. It could include a really long list of foods you avoid due to their ingredients. So a lot of people avoid gluten, even though they're not celiacs, or dairy, even though they're not lactose intolerant. A lot of people avoid sugar because, eye roll, sugar is quote unquote toxic in diet culture. It could also include things you've eaten in the past. So maybe you ate something yesterday that you wish you wouldn't have eaten. So guilt, shame, regret about things you've eaten, or things that you've eaten that make you feel like you're a failure, or you need to make up for something you've eaten in the past by eating differently in the future. So kind of like a course correction, if you will. Again, we're thinking about the thought capacity that food and eating take up, which could be about future meals or past meals. And just give yourself a number. How much thought, energy, space, capacity goes towards thoughts on food and eating? Okay, cool. That was part 1. Part 2. Now think about how much mental space and energy and capacity go into how much you think about exercise, working out, or movement. This could also be exercise in the future and exercising quote unquote correctly or right. And that includes things maybe like doing the perfect strength training routine, or maybe it's a thought about exercise from the past, like maybe you quote unquote skipped a day and then you're trying to make up for that in the future. Maybe you feel regret, guilt, or shame about, missing this workout, or this workout wasn't intense as I wanted it to be, or I wasn't as sore as I wanted to be, or I didn't burn as many calories as I wanted to. I didn't get sweaty enough. I could go on and on and on about things that like I myself have thought in the past, but also things that my clients have told me. Okay, so just basically fitness, movement, exercising, and the pressures to do that. And so come up with a number. How much of your mental capacity is going towards movement? That could also be like researching the right, quote unquote, right way to exercise. And I should add that to like the food and eating section too, like researching nutrition. I'll just let you run with that. Okay, so give exercise fitness a number, a percentage. That was part 2. Moving on to part 3. Now we are going to think about how much mental space and our thought capacity goes towards thinking about your appearance and things that we want to include in that. Thoughts that come up when we see our reflection in the mirror. And sometimes we see our reflection in the mirror and we're like, oh, hey, that's my reflection. Cool. And moving on to all of the other awesome things I'm going to think about and be doing today. And sometimes we see our reflection and that mental image of our appearance, whether it's in the mirror or in a photo, kind of stick with us, and we revisit those thoughts, and they kind of hang in our thoughts really negatively for the day or the week. Or maybe we see our appearance and we start thinking about, gosh, I really don't like how I look. And these are all of the behaviors that I'm going to start engaging in to change my appearance and make my appearance different. And so trying to make yourself look different or quote unquote better. It could have to do with clothing sometimes, like picking out outfits. It could have to do with makeup. It could have to do with hair. But basically what we're getting to is the thoughts on your appearance about the size, shape, or weight of your body and how much mental capacity that takes up. So give that a number. That's the third part of this question. Okay, now we want to add those 3 percentages together. So we're adding the number you gave for your thought capacity on food-related thoughts, plus the thought capacity that goes to exercise or movement or fitness, plus the percentage that you assign to thoughts regarding your appearance or the size, shape, and weight of your body. Add those all together. What did you come up with? Now what I want you to think about is, are those thoughts, food, exercise, and your appearance worthy of the percentage of mental energy that's going to it? So there's not really a right or wrong answer. Everybody's answer is going to be very different and very individual based on a lot of things in their life. So let me give you an example. I am an adult. I don't have any children, so I don't need to spend any of my mental capacity thinking about feeding a child that I'm caring for or feeding a loved one that I'm caring for. My husband's pretty self-sufficient at feeding himself. I do make meals for us to eat together. He works night shift right now, so we're not eating dinner together. So I'm mostly on my own for dinner. He's on his own, doing his own thing. So that's mental energy and thought capacity that I don't spend really thinking about preparing a shared meal that regularly. It's maybe happening 2 or 3 times a week for us. But if you are a mother of a child or several children, you are going to put more of your mental capacity to thinking about food because you're responsible for feeding other humans and keeping them alive with food. So you're going to probably be putting more thought into dinner menus and making lunches and getting them fed before you send them off to school. You're going to be spending thought about grocery lists. Especially, gosh, if you have a picky eater, that gets really challenging. So my grocery list shopping is basically, what do I want to eat? What am I craving? What sounds good? But if you are making meals for other people, you also have to take into consideration their food preferences and likes and dislikes. It's just going to be very different for everybody. If you are working a full-time job and you own a home that you're responsible for taking care of and you're a parent, you might not have time for exercise and fitness, and that is perfectly understandable. So some people might be giving 0 thought to exercise and fitness. It's just not something they are doing right now, and no judgment. Movement is morally neutral, meaning I don't think you are a better person if you engage in exercise and fitness, and I don't think you're a worse person if you don't. Whether that is because you don't have time to, you don't want to, you are in pain because of an injury, you just absolutely despise it because you were chosen last for dodgeball when you were in 2nd grade and you don't have a great relationship with it right now. Movement is morally neutral, so you assigned a number to that, whatever. Okay. And the last one was appearance. Some people, I don't think about their appearance that much at all. Other people, that takes up a lot of their mental capacity. Something else that I hear from clients is I'm thinking about other things through the day. I go to work and I think about work, and when I'm driving, I think about driving, and I have a hobby. So when I'm doing my hobby, I think about that. But like these thoughts about food and my appearance and fitness, like even though I'm thinking about other things, they're kind of always still on in the background of my head. They're still there, even though I'm thinking about other things. It's just like they're kind of festering and taking up a lot more energy in the background. So I hope that you've kind of come up with a number, like added those 3 things up, come up with a total, and then you've thought about, is food, is exercise, is my appearance deserving of these thoughts? Or, am I at 90% and I think those things might really only be worth like a total of 30%. I have to get this down. I have to stop thinking about these thoughts so much. They're taking over, and that's taking away from some of the other things I can and want to be thinking about that would be adding more positivity to my life and make my life more enjoyable. I know when I was in a really bad place, and this was probably 7 or 8 years ago, but I was kind of in a really bad place for 2 decades, a decade and a half, a really long time. So I would say, honestly, when I was in a bad place, thoughts about my appearance and food and exercise, it was probably taking up 90 to 95% of my thought energy while I was awake. And gosh, looking back, I can think of how kind of screwed up this was. I'm going to share a personal story with you. My husband's probably going to he doesn't know this, so I don't think he's going to listen. But if he does, he's probably going to cringe. So my husband proposed to me in the Ozarks on our friend's boat. It's literally probably the best day or one of the best days of my entire life. It ended up being this incredibly fun day, even though it started off as me being a total brat before he proposed. A story for another time. But he proposed pretty early on in the morning, and then the rest of the day we just celebrated and danced and ate and swam and went to a bunch of play. And we literally told every single person that I came across, people I didn't know, like, I am engaged. My husband proposed to me today. Just celebrated with as many people as possible. It was, again, the funnest day of my life, best day ever. And stayed up really late celebrating. And I remember the next morning, I woke up and I'm like laying in bed, and something that was happening to me often previously is that the very first thought that would come into my head would be like, what did I eat yesterday? And this mental calculator would just start adding and subtracting and analyzing and rating things on whether they were quote unquote good or quote unquote bad. And I remember waking up and being like, what did I eat? What did I have for dinner? Did I have like a late night snack? And then being like, oh my God, I'm engaged. And like looking at my engagement ring on my finger and like thinking like, wow, it's really freaking screwed up that my first thought this morning wasn't, I'm engaged. My first thought, my automatic thought that jumped into my head was, what did I eat yesterday, from a place of regret and guilt and shame and perfection, basically. And like that, I don't know, that it shouldn't have been my first thought. I think my first thought should have been like, well, yesterday was the best day of my life. Oh my gosh, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with my husband, and this ring is so beautiful, and like all of those thoughts. So anyway, yeah, that was my side note story about myself I wanted to share with you all. So where you are, what is that current percentage? And then what do you think is like a more realistic percentage that would maybe be better for your mental health? And we'll work on trying to get you to that. All right, I'm done rambling about the first question. The first question is complete. Moving on to question number 2 of 3. Something I do with a lot of my clients right out of the gate. So we're doing this maybe in the first or second appointment, almost always, is I give them 2 journaling prompts. So this question is going to be the first journaling prompt. And what I really would advise strongly is that you listen to this question and hit pause and put a pen to paper or do some typing. I don't care. I do feel like there's something a little bit more powerful about putting a pen to paper than typing, but you do you. and put some thoughts into this. And it doesn't matter if it's paragraph form or, sloppy, crossed out, not punctuated, not spelled correctly. Side note, I'm like the world's worst speller, so no judgment about the spelling. It could also be just bullet points. You're totally welcome to make a list. A lot of people do list making with this journal prompt, but I ask that when people do it, when you do it, because you're going to push pause and do this shortly, is do it, read it, make it complete, leave no stone unturned. I actually really encourage people to maybe even walk away from it for a day or two and then revisit it, because what happens often is you revisit it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is really good, but wow, I can't believe I left all of this other really important stuff out of it. It's not complete yet. I have to add X, Y, and Z. And okay, now it is complete. I've got it all out there. Okay. Here's question number 2, which is a journaling prompt to put some thought into. What does your ideal relationship with food look and feel like? I'm going to repeat it. What does your ideal relationship with food look and feel like? Meaning, someday in the future, when you are not struggling with food anymore and you've moved past this and you're in a better place, what does your positive relationship with food look and feel like? So hit pause, put some thought into that, and push play when you're complete. Okay, moving on. Question 3, also a journaling prompt. It is so similar to the previous journaling prompt, question number 2, but it's different, and they're similar, they're related, but at the same time, they're very different. So here it is. Again, you're going to push pause right after this and put a pen to paper and get it all out until it's complete. Question 3, what does your ideal relationship with your body look and feel like? One time I had a person do this wrong. Usually I say there's not a right or wrong way to do this, but there is a wrong way to do this one. I am not asking you what your quote unquote ideal body looks like. I'm not asking about how you want your appearance to change. I'm asking you about the relationship you have with your body and what that looks and feels like. Typically, this one is a little bit more challenging for people than when they're doing the journaling about their ideal relationship with food. And I think that is because food is like this tangible thing. It's this thing we can see and touch, and we consume it. We put it into our body. Whereas our relationship with our body, it's based on thoughts, and thoughts aren't this tangible thing like food is. So I don't feel like measurable is the correct word, but there's just a difference in a tangible item versus a non-tangible item that's just thoughts. When I'm working with a client, one of the things that I commonly ask them in the following appointment, after I've given them these 2 journaling prompts about ideal relationship with food and ideal relationship with body, I kind of ask them, was this at all emotional for you to write about? Did you have any emotions that were coming up? I would say 50% of the time people say nope. 50% of the time people are like, yeah, there was some emotions that kind of came to the surface. A lot of times I'll ask which one was easier, which one was harder. It's almost always food was a little bit easier. The body image stuff was a little bit more challenging. A lot of times I'll ask oh, did you have any aha moments? More like pieces of gold that came up. Some people kind of combine the 2 into one, and other people keep the 2 totally separate. So they are similar, they're related. They can kind of roll into one. Or again, it can be separate. This is my food list. This is my body list. Whatever you did, cool. So the goal of this journaling is I am always under the assumption as the coach that whatever you came up with in your lists or your journaling is where you want to be. And so my assumption is that you are not there yet. And actually, the opposite of where you want to be is where you're currently at. So, the opposite of where you're going or your goals is what you're currently struggling with. That being said, ideally, in my mind, where you want to be or what your ideal relationship with your body would look and feel like someday when you're no longer struggling with the things you're currently struggling with, causing you to have a poor body image, is kind of like the goal for body image. Okay, so one time I had this client and I thought this was incredibly fascinating. She felt like her relationship with her body was completely a totally different thing than her body image. So she then went and did some more journaling about her ideal body image, what that would look and feel like. So maybe you have some thoughts on like, yeah, my relationship with my body is totally a different monster, a different beast, a different entity entirely than my body image. Or maybe you feel like those things are basically synonyms or two words meaning the same thing. And that's just individual based on you to put some thought into. So when I'm working with a client, a lot of times they're open to sharing with me what they came up with when they did their journaling. So we have a conversation about it. And so we'll start with food. I'm going to kind of lay out some real life examples that I hear very regularly to give you guys some ideas. Sometimes I'll have a client and they're sharing what they want their ideal relationship with food to look and feel like with me. And I'm like, yes, I love that one. That is so good. I am on board with that. And I know I can help you get to a better place with that. Like we can get you there. There is no doubt in my mind. Other times, some of their goals, more their ideal relationship with food, what that would look and feel like, I'm like, I can see why you would have said that. I totally understand why you're thinking that, but I feel like it's rooted in diet culture a little bit. And if you haven't listened to the previous episode about diet culture, that was episode 2, the last episode. We explained and defined diet culture, so you can listen to that. But what I'm looking for is, are their goals rooted in diet culture? And if they are, we'll have a conversation about like, a lot of times it's like, I would never say to someone like, that's a bad goal. But I would say, I don't know if that's realistic. Let me give you just a real life example. Often a client will say, as one of their goals with food, I want to eat when I'm hungry and I want to stop when I am full. And I'm like, yeah, I totally understand why you would have written that, but I don't know if that's realistic. I feel like you would constantly be disappointed in yourself and feeling like a failure because as humans, sometimes we eat to the point of uncomfortable fullness, and that will always happen. So having a goal of never eating beyond comfortable fullness, always stopping at comfort and never going into the territory of uncomfortable fullness or painful fullness or hurts to breathe fullness. It's just not a realistic goal because we don't only eat food for fuel. Like, yes, food is fuel, but it's also comfort, and it will always be comfort. Food is emotional because we're humans, and it will always be. So having this idea in the back of your head that someday it will not be and food will only be fuel, like we kind of talk through like, I get why you would want that to happen, but it's a diet culture goal, basically. So yeah, what you're looking for is maybe goals that would be rooted in diet culture when it comes to food, or even like, okay, so then if we move on to appearance goals or what the ideal relationship with your body looks and feels like, we are wanting to look for where diet culture might be coming up in that, which is like if you notice any of your goals being super appearance based. Real life example. Maybe a client says, I want to be able to look in the mirror and see my reflection and think that I am beautiful. And I'm like, oh, I totally understand why you would have said that. And it's a little bit too appearance based and too focused on appearance. This is where my concern comes in. Say you are able to look in the mirror and you're like, wow, I look great today. I'm beautiful. What happens in 30 years from now? Are you still going to be able to think you're beautiful when you are aging? Because as we age, unfortunately, we're moving farther and farther away from the stupid eye roll, quote unquote, like ideal, impossible beauty standards. And we're probably going to start like checking less and less of those boxes as we age. And that's like a scary thing. And can we take the focus off of appearance and move the focus more to maybe even just being neutral with my appearance? Like I can see my reflection and it doesn't make or break my day. I can see my reflection in the mirror. I can see a photo of myself and know that regardless of, even if I don't like how I look, I am still worthy. I'm still deserving of love and kindness, which means love and kindness from others, but also love and kindness from ourselves. And can I just move on? Like, yep, that's my reflection. That's how I look in the picture. And what else am I doing today? Not just dwelling and living there and changing all of these behaviors in order to change our appearance. To wrap everything up, what we did with today's episode is really assess where you are currently at, what challenges and struggles are coming up for you with the thought capacity going towards food, appearance, exercise, where you're at, where you want to get to. And then we also have a really good idea and assessment of where you're currently at with food challenges and challenges with your relationship with your body or your body image, and idea of the direction we want to go and improvements that we need to make, changes that we need to make in order to get to where we want to be, which is hopefully a better place. And I'm always here to support you. It's so easy to just go to my website. Everybody gets a free consultation over Zoom. They typically last 30 or so minutes. And if you want a little bit more support and help analyzing these things, or you'd like to have a conversation, that's what I'm here for. So please utilize me as a tool on this journey. That's the show. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, I'd be so grateful if you take a minute to follow or subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you're listening on. It helps others to find the podcast and continue spreading this important information to more people who need to hear it. This podcast is made possible by paid supporters at patreon.com/makepeacewithfood. They're truly what keep this show going so that I can pay my assistant, editor, producer, and allow me to keep sharing all of this content and doing this important and needed work with you all. Go to patreon.com/makepeacewithfood to sign up for as little as $3 per month. Make Peace with Food is hosted by me, Emily LaVoie. It's produced and edited by Jake Lamore at Pathfinder. Thank you so much for your support.